It's becoming something of an annual tradition among certain circles to debate the Christmas carol, Mary, Did You Know? Mary, did you know that your baby boy is Lord of all creation? Mary, did you know that your baby boy will one day rule the nations? Opponents of the carol exclaim that yes, Mary did know. In fact, she sings a whole song about it in Luke 1, her Magnificat, rejoicing that through her God will do mighty things, pulling tyrants down from their thrones and raising up the lowly. But proponents of the song say that it just intends to invoke the same wonder and awe that Mary did indeed feel by reminding us of what she knew. And besides, it has a nice melody, so can't we just enjoy it? Well, I have a proposal that I hope might bring both sides in this debate together. We could change just one word throughout the song in order to maintain the wonder and awe, and perhaps make it a little more accurate. Joseph, did you know? Joseph, did you know when you kiss your little baby, you kiss the face of God? Joseph, did you know? Come, journey with me back through the events that lead to today's reading, the presentation at the temple. As we go, I invite you to join me in using God's wonderful gift of imagination to put yourself in Joseph's shoes, to imagine what this quietly pious carpenter is thinking and feeling as he gets swept up in the miracle that merges divinity, all-powerful divinity, and the most disenfranchised of humanity. As we take this journey together, we will see how this simple man finds all of his plans and expectations utterly upended, almost excuses himself from the story, but then rises to the occasion, so that by the time we reach the temple scene, Joseph will have proven himself to be far more than meets the eye. Join me. Joseph is not a wealthy man. He is not a powerful man. He is a man born in an unimportant corner of an unimportant occupied country, born to a people that have weathered many an empire's tyranny over the centuries. Joseph knows that he cannot do much about Rome's rule. What he can do is carve out a small but decent living as a carpenter, offer kindness to his neighbors in their backwater town, and devote himself to the God who has seen Joseph's people through situations even worse than this one. He's just a simple man with simple plans for his life. Maintain his good job, find a good wife, be faithful to his good God. So, he gets engaged to a girl who seems like the perfect fit for him, equally in love with God, equally proud of their Jewish faith, a little bit bolder than he is, but kind, generous, as invested as following the Torah as he is. Not that he's gotten much of a chance to get to know her yet. In his world, men and women who are strangers to each other don't interact too much. But he knows what he's seen and heard of her, and he is happy to set about preparing for her to move into his home. He even starts thinking about building a cradle, but no, it's too soon for that, right? Yeah, he chuckles at himself. That can wait. But then he brings him news that strikes him like a mallet strikes a nail. She is with child, and not by him, and therefore by some other man in their small town. He has been as faithful to her as he is to God, but she has betrayed them, betrayed their partnership before it even had the chance to get going. He had thought that he knew who she was, but he was totally wrong. It hurts, but Joseph is a decent man. He has no desire to bring her public shame, he'll cancel their marriage contract quietly, leave her to raise her baby with her family's help, or more likely, whoever got her pregnant will take her in. Yes, she'll be fine, he assures himself, and he will be safe from further heartbreak. Joseph assumes that this is what God expects of him, to be decent but firm. Surely God doesn't want him to make a big show of it or stone the poor girl, but he's also convinced that God doesn't expect him to just accept Mary as she is. When I hear of Joseph's plans to cut things off with Mary after she goes against his expectations, what jumps to my mind is the myriad of stories from queer friends about reactions to their coming out. I have a few such stories myself. Loved ones who respond to their hopeful joy, their vulnerable news, with tears, anger, confusion, dismay. I feel like I don't know you anymore. If you follow this path, you are not welcome in my life. There is often the same sense of betrayal that Joseph must have felt. How could you do this to me? Our partners or parents will demand, as if we have decided to be gay or trans or bi just to hurt them, just to spite them. But the good news of our queerness is no more about them than the good news of Mary's pregnancy was about Joseph. It was news that she longed to share with Joseph, to delight in with Joseph, but he felt that he couldn't be part of it. He did not believe her when she said that it was brought about by God. He assumed that God's will for him was to cut her out of his life, to leave her by herself. But of course, God's will isn't always what any of us expects. As Reverend Tim vividly preached on a few weeks ago, God sends an angel to visit Joseph, wrapped in the soft darkness of dreams. This holy messenger tells him not to be afraid to take Mary as his wife, because her baby was conceived, queerly enough, without any man involved. Instead, through the Holy Spirit, Mary is the faithful young woman he had known her to be. This transformation does not change that about her. Indeed, she is as faithful as any human has ever been, daring to say yes to God, even if it meant disgrace in the eyes of the world. What makes Mary extraordinary is that she is immediately on board with God's plan. After just a couple clarifying questions, she immediately sees and understands what role God is asking her to play in God's revolution, an unfolding that will lift up those who, like her, are poor and oppressed, and pull down the rich and powerful to the same level as everyone else. What makes Joseph extraordinary, meanwhile, is that when he incorrectly assumes the will of God, he is open to changing his mind. That is a rare trait, especially in our own day. How many of us who, for things we are pretty sure we know God's opinion on, would be willing to completely switch gears upon a dream's instructions? I think most of us would find ways to reason the dream away, just as Scrooge in A Christmas Carol tries to reason away the appearance of a literal ghost before his very eyes by claiming it must have been something he ate. A crumb of cheese, a fragment of underdone potato. There's more of gravy than of grave about you. Joseph could have done likewise. It would have been far easier for him to do so, and I bet many in his community would have been on his side. But instead, Joseph chooses the harder path. He allows himself to be changed by God. I can only imagine how awkward and anxious he felt when he approached Mary to ask if she would still have him. after what he'd said in response to her coming out moment, her good news. He likely admitted he still didn't understand, that he still had a lot of questions, but he would like to try if she could find it in herself to forgive him. And Mary, being truly very full of grace, does indeed welcome him back into her life. And from that day onward, Joseph is as good a partner as anyone could ask for. When his little family needs shelter, he knocks on every door in Bethlehem and will not be turned away, will not take no for an answer until a stable is finally offered for them to crash in. When Mary is in the throes of her labor pains, with no midwife to be found, I imagine that Joseph is the one who scrambles to gather water, to get some clean straw, and he kneels beside her, offers his hand for her to squeeze hard until it hurts, as she gives birth to the creator of the universe. And then, when shepherds come to worship the newborn infant that Joseph wiped the blood and gunk away from, they worship Jesus, and Joseph wonders what on earth he's gotten himself into. But whatever it is, he is ride or die now. He is not going anywhere, except, of course, to the temple, which brings us back at last to today's reading. Joseph is, above all else, a good Jew. And that matters. That must be emphasized in our own time that is still rife and rotten with anti-Semitism, where hate crimes against Jewish communities have risen yet again this month. Joseph was a good Jew. The parents of Jesus Christ obeyed God's instructions for their people as laid out in the Torah, and for them that meant ritual washing and sacrifices. Note one interesting point about the ritual washing in our story. Here's the part in the gospel reading. When the days of their ritual washing were fulfilled, according to the Torah of Moses, Mary and Joseph brought Jesus to Jerusalem to present him to the Lord. The days of their ritual washing, plural. Mary's and Joseph's washing together. The Torah of Moses, specifically Leviticus 12, requires only the one who gave birth to ritually wash themselves. But Joseph joins Mary in this ritual. Why? Perhaps it's his way of showing solidarity with Mary, a way for Joseph to show that whatever she undergoes, he will undergo too. When she went through the pain of childbirth, he was there to ease her along, providing shelter and a hand to squeeze. When she goes through her ritual washing, he joins her, because her needs are his needs. Her faith is his faith. So yes, as our reading tells us, Joseph and Mary perform the ritual washing together, and then together they take their child to the temple so that they might offer a sacrifice, 2 pigeons, the poor person's option, in thanksgiving to God. And while they are there, Simeon and Anna come to exalt in their baby. And Mary and Joseph, the text tells us, both marvel at what is said to them. But in my imagination, Mary's marveling is mainly that these things are happening to her, an impoverished nobody, while Joseph's marveling is mainly that these things are happening at all. These 2 reverent and respected elders had been waiting for years for a little infant whom they say will be light to the Gentiles and honor for Israel. What exactly does that entail? And why on earth has he, Joseph, a quiet carpenter, been brought into something that sounds like a revolution, something that is clearly beyond him? But Mary takes Joseph's hand, as if she can feel the confusion emanating from him, as if to say, it's okay. And he feels a little better. This special destiny stuff may be beyond him, But what he does know how to be is a good Jew, a good husband, a good father. He can keep doing what he's doing right now, worship God with his family, take turns waking up in the middle of the night when Jesus is fussing, help Jesus learn to walk, teach him how to read the Torah when he gets older, even teach Jesus carpentry if he has time amidst his other job of bringing God's salvation to all peoples. Joseph smiles back at Mary. He can do this. He can be her partner one step at a time. And then Simeon speaks again, and it is ice down Joseph's spine. Still holding the child, the old man says to Mary, and to Mary alone, "Listen, a sword shall slice through your very soul." A sword slice through Mary's soul, and not Joseph's? He would take it for her, share the anguish with her, anything but let her face it alone. But Simeon is not speaking these words to him or to them as a couple. And again, Joseph doesn't understand why, but he understands that this is Mary's burden alone. Joseph wants to despair, but Mary is crumpling at his side, her eyes brimming over as she reaches to take the baby back from Simeon, and Joseph squares his shoulders. There may be kinds of pain that he cannot share with Mary. Her contractions when she gave birth, for instance, that pain had been hers alone. But he'd offered his hand for her to squeeze, and that had helped. When he can't take her pain from her, he will stay by her side through it all, as long as he has breath in his lungs. My siblings in Christ, that is what allyship is. That is what solidarity is. That is what love thy neighbor means. Just as God extended the ultimate solidarity to all of us, but especially to those who are most mistreated, tortured, despised in our world, by entering humanity as an infant who knew poverty and the life of a refugee and even execution at the hands of a corrupt state, so we are called to extend our solidarity to others, even when we don't know all the details of their struggle. In this time of pandemic, for instance, when we are all struggling to some extent, it is still impossible for me to fully understand your pain and what it means to you. I can tell you that I am going through trouble too, but that doesn't mean that I know, at this point in my life at least, what it is to be unable to be with my loved one dying in a hospital, what it is to lose my job or my home or any of the other ways you might be suffering right now. Yet, we can still support one another, extending help when we are able and bravely accepting help when we need it. So, how are you called to be like Joseph, even when you cannot fully understand what others are going through? Maybe you struggle to understand why getting a trans person's pronouns right is so important, or why it is vital to proclaim that Black lives matter, or why a marginalized person snaps at you in frustration for what to you seems like a small mistake. It's okay to be confused and uncertain, so long as we open ourselves up to learning what we can, to apologizing and making amends when we mess up, and to remaining committed to our neighbor's cause, no matter what. There is a message that I've seen written on other white people's signs at protests. I understand that I will never understand, but still, I stand with you. This is an important message for those of us who are white to absorb, to accept that we will never understand what it feels like to experience the various forms of racism that Black, Indigenous people of color go through. It is not shameful to admit that we cannot get it. In fact, it is a vital step in our education to realize that we can't wait for that magical day when we finally get it. We must stand in solidarity now. I understand that I will never understand fully what you are going through, but still, like Joseph, I stand with you. And I offer my deepest thanks when you likewise stand with me. Only together, with all of our different roles to play and unique perspectives to share, will we draw closer to what God's revolution is bringing about even now. Abundant life for all peoples, for all living beings, for all of creation. Thanks be to God.